Welcome on board, chosen one. Look who is still standing after everything they threw at you, after every lie they planted, every story they twisted, every room they poisoned before you even walked in. When they said you were finished, when they said your name was done, when they whispered, "It's over" for them, like it was already written. Funny how quiet they get when the ending doesn't go their way. They said you were the problem. They said you were unstable, dramatic, difficult, untrustworthy. They said it so many times they started believing it themselves. They repeated it in meetings you were never invited to, in group chats you never saw, in smiles that never reached their eyes. They built a whole fake version of you and tried to sell it as truth. And for a while, it worked. You felt it, the cold shoulders, the sudden distance, the way people stopped asking questions and just accepted the story that was easiest. That was the pain. Being judged without a trial, being sentenced without evidence, carrying shame that wasn't yours while the real culprits slept peacefully, convinced they had won. They thought burying you under rumors was the same as burying the truth. They thought time would erase the facts. They thought fear would keep mouths shut forever. But here's the part they never planned for. Someone started digging. Not because they liked you, not because they were loyal, but because the story didn't make sense. Dates didn't line up. Messages contradicted each other. Actions didn't match the accusations. And once one crack appeared, the whole thing started to fall apart. Proof doesn't scream. Proof waits. Proof sits quietly until someone is brave enough to look at it properly. This is where the atmosphere changed. The noise around you faded. The fake confidence on their faces cracked. You didn't even have to say anything. Silence became your weapon. While you were rebuilding yourself, they were panicking in private. While you were healing, they were scrambling to cover tracks that were already visible. That's the shift. The moment the universe flips the weight of the room without announcing it. Before we go further, press the like button and subscribe. Not for the algorithm. Do it as a signal, a receipt, a way of paying this message back and strengthening this collective voice. Because this isn't just your story. This has happened before. History is full of people who were called liars until documents surfaced, called crazy until recordings played, called villains until timelines were laid out, and suddenly everyone needed an apology tour. Every time power feels threatened, it tries to rewrite reality, and every time it underestimates one thing: evidence ages better than lies. You know what really scares them now? It's not revenge, it's not confrontation, it's justice. Real justice doesn't shout, it doesn't rush. It shows up with folders, screenshots, witnesses, patterns, and dates. It shows up calm. It shows up undeniable. And once it does, people start switching sides fast. The same ones who stayed silent suddenly want to clear your name. The same ones who avoided you now want to stand with you. Look who's fighting for your justice now. Look who suddenly believes you. Look who says, "We owe you an explanation." Oh, the legend needs to bow now. Interesting change of tone. This is the aftermath of the battle. You're not imagining it. You're standing in it. The enemy's efforts look empty because they are. All that manipulation, all that damage, all that planning, undone by truth, doing what truth always does when it's finally uncovered. Nothing heroic about lies collapsing. That's just gravity. And here's the villain wisdom they never wanted you to hear. You didn't win by being louder. You didn't win by proving yourself to people who already decided to misunderstand you. You won by surviving long enough for the truth to surface. You won by not becoming what they accused you of. You won by letting the universe handle the timing while you handled your character. They thought you'd break. They thought you'd snap, lash out, ruin your own case. They were waiting for that moment. When it never came, they panicked. When proof came instead, they lost control of the narrative. That's why they're scrambling now. That's why justice is no longer optional. It's inevitable. So stand there, calm, grounded, watching the pieces fall back into place, not celebrating loudly, not begging for apologies, just knowing that the truth found its way back to the surface, like it always does. They uncovered proof you were right all along, and now they'll fight for your justice, no matter the cost. Not because they're brave, because they're cornered. And you're no longer the accused. You're the one the story revolves around now. And now, chosen one, this is where the door closes behind you. Not everyone listening deserves what comes next. This part is for the ones who were proven right too late, for the ones who carried the weight while others played judge with no facts. You're not here by accident. You're here because something inside you recognizes what's happening now. The proof is out. The truth is no longer negotiable, and justice is no longer a rumor. This is where we slow it down and break it apart step by step, not emotionally, strategically, because what's unfolding next isn't chaos, it's a process, and if you've lived this story, you'll feel the pull to stay till the end, without me begging you to. You'll stay because every word starts lining up with moments from your own past that suddenly make sense. So before we move forward, mark your presence. Drop 777 in the comments, not as a ritual, as a signal, a quiet way of saying, I know what it costs to be right before anyone listens. It tells the universe you're ready to watch justice unfold without flinching, without rushing, without sabotaging the win. Take a breath. Lock in. Now, let's get started. Number 1. They didn't just lie. They built a whole crime scene around you. The loudest lie is the one told by many mouths at the same time. This wasn't a slip. This wasn't confusion. This wasn't one messy moment that got out of hand. What they did was organized, calculated, cold. They didn't just lie about you. They designed an environment where the lie felt more believable than the truth. And that's the part most people miss. Lies don't win because they're smart. They win because they're repeated with confidence and backed by numbers. They didn't wake up one day and misunderstand you. They sat down and agreed on a version of reality where you had to be the villain for them to survive, looking innocent. Group chats became control rooms. Side comments became strategy. Subtle posts weren't random. They were bait. They timed conversations, compared notes, and made sure the same distorted story hit different ears from different angles. When enough people hear the same thing, the human brain stops asking questions. That's how echo chambers are built. Not with truth, but with coordination. You felt it before you understood it. The shift in energy, the way rooms went quiet when you entered, the way conversations ended early, the way people looked at you like they already knew something you were never told about. That wasn't intuition. That was fallout. That was the lie doing its rounds before you even knew a war had started. And here's the sick genius of what they did. Every move you made was turned against you. When you tried to explain, they said you were manipulative. When you defended yourself, they said you were aggressive. When you showed hurt, they labeled you unstable. When you stayed silent, they called it guilt. There was no winning inside a rigged game. They didn't care what you said. They only cared how your reaction could be edited to fit the story they already sold. That's the question you're asking yourself right now, even if you don't say it out loud. Why did everything I did make it worse? Because the lie wasn't about facts, it was about control. Your emotions became their evidence, your humanity became their weapon. They needed you to react so they could point and say, "See, this is exactly who we said they were." Think about it. If you stayed calm, they called you cold. If you spoke up, they called you dramatic. If you walked away, they said you were running. If you stayed, they said you were plotting. That's not misunderstanding. That's entrapment. And the hardest part, watching people believe it. Watching people you never wronged nod along because the lie was easier than the truth. Truth requires effort. It requires discomfort. Lies just require agreement. So they agreed. Not because it was right, but because it was convenient. Here's the metaphor. They don't want you to understand. They didn't attack you directly. They set the stage and let gravity do the work, like pushing someone into wet cement and letting time harden it. By the time you realized what was happening, the narrative was already setting. Every attempt to move only made it look messier to outsiders who didn't see who pushed you in. And yet, here's where the villain becomes the hero, because lies built this way have a fatal flaw. They depend on everyone remembering the script the same way forever. One contradiction cracks the wall, one screenshot, one timeline mismatch, one person brave enough to ask, "Wait, this doesn't add up." The bigger the lie, the more pieces it has, and the more pieces it has, the more chances it has to fall apart. You weren't crazy for feeling confused. You weren't weak for doubting yourself. Anyone placed inside a manufactured reality starts questioning their own memory. That's not a flaw, that's psychology. Gaslighting works because the brain wants coherence. They use that against you, but coherence cuts both ways. Once proof enters the picture, the brain can't unsee it. That's why things started shifting without you doing anything. That's why whispers turned into questions. That's why the same people who once avoided you started acting cautious. They saw the cracks. They felt the tension. Lies rot from the inside. Let this hit the enemy where it hurts. They thought they were smart. They thought controlling the story meant controlling the outcome. They underestimated one thing. Truth doesn't need permission to surface. It only needs time and one person willing to look closely. And now that proof exists, their confidence collapses. Notice how they stop repeating the story with the same energy. Notice how details suddenly get fuzzy. Notice how phrases change from "they did this" to "it was misunderstood." That's not growth. That's retreat. That's what happens when people realize the version they sold can't survive daylight. This is where you stop asking, "Why did they do this to me?" and start understanding they needed this to be true because the real story exposed them. You were the mirror they couldn't stand to look into, so they tried to shatter it. But mirrors don't lie, they just reflect. And now the reflection is everywhere. You didn't imagine the coordination. You didn't imagine the damage. You didn't imagine the silence turning against you. What you survived was real. What they built was intentional. And what's happening now is the natural collapse of something that was never solid to begin with. Let them panic. Let them scramble. Let them rewrite their own words. You're not here to convince anymore. That stage is over. Proof does the talking now. They built a lie like a fortress, and they forgot fortresses fall hardest when they're empty inside. Stand there, calm, unmoving, watching the structure crack under its own weight. This isn't revenge. This is exposure, and exposure doesn't scream. It just reveals. Number 2. They didn't come with weapons. They came for your mind. The cleanest attacks don't leave bruises. They leave confusion. What they did next wasn't loud. It wasn't obvious. It didn't look like cruelty to outsiders. That's why it worked. They didn't just go after your reputation. They went after your sense of reality, your sense of safety, your sense of belonging. They understood something dangerous about human psychology. If you can isolate someone long enough, you don't need to destroy them. They'll start doing the work for you. This is where friends slowly became informants, not openly, quietly. Conversations felt off. Questions sounded innocent but carried weight. "I just want to understand," they said, while reporting your words back to people who already wanted you painted a certain way. Allies didn't confront you. They observed you, took notes, waited for slips. And suddenly, the people you felt safest around felt like rooms with hidden cameras. You probably asked yourself this question late at night. Why do I feel alone even when I'm surrounded by people? Because isolation doesn't always look like abandonment. Sometimes it looks like being watched instead of supported, heard instead of understood. Imagine this. You're standing in a room where the temperature keeps dropping, but everyone else insists it's warm. You start rubbing your arms, questioning your own senses. That's psychological warfare, not denying your existence, but denying your experience, making you doubt what you feel, what you remember, what you know happened. They turned safe spaces into hostile territory. Places you once relaxed in became tight, heavy, uncomfortable. Conversations stopped when you entered. Laughter softened. Energy shifted. You didn't need an announcement. Your nervous system picked it up instantly. Humans are wired to sense social danger before logic catches up. That's not weakness. That's survival instinct. And while this was happening, they played a role so polished it almost deserves an award. Online, they posted quotes about healing, about boundaries, about protecting their peace. They used the language of growth as camouflage. To the outside world, they looked calm, mature, evolved. To anyone not paying attention, they were the victims choosing grace. Behind the scenes, they were engineers, architects, carefully moving pieces on a board you didn't even know you were playing on. Here's a quote they hate hearing now. "Anyone who has to announce their peace is usually at war." You were confused because the mask didn't match the behavior, and that confusion is exactly where they wanted you. Psychological warfare works best when the victim can't explain what's happening without sounding crazy. That's the trap. You felt attacked, but couldn't point to a single moment that proved it cleanly. So you stayed quiet. You minimized. You doubted yourself. Imagine this again. You're walking through fog while someone else controls the lights. Sometimes they flicker just enough for you to see shapes, then go dark again. You're not lost because you're stupid. You're lost because visibility is being controlled. Another question you might be asking right now is, why did they smile while doing this? Because cruelty doesn't always come angry. Sometimes it comes calm. Smiling people are trusted. Calm voices are believed. Emotional distance reads as maturity to those who don't know the full story. They weaponized that perception. They didn't want confrontation. Confrontation creates witnesses. They wanted erosion, bit by bit, doubt by doubt, relationship by relationship. It's easier to discredit someone when they're standing alone. Here's another gut punch for the enemy. Isolation is the favorite tool of people who can't survive exposure. Imagine termites inside a house. You don't hear them, you don't see them. The structure looks fine until one day it collapses under a weight it should have easily held. That's what they tried to do to you. Eat away at your support system until you cracked under pressure and proved their story for them. But something went wrong. You didn't collapse the way they expected. You questioned, you observed, you went quiet, not out of guilt, but out of awareness. While they were busy watching you, they exposed themselves. Patterns formed, inconsistencies piled up. People started noticing that the peaceful ones seemed to be surrounded by chaos wherever they went. Another quote to let sink in. If everyone around someone is always the problem, look closer at the center. This is the part they underestimated. Psychological warfare depends on control of perception. Once perception shifts, the entire operation fails, and perception always shifts when facts enter the room. You might wonder, why do I feel stronger now, even though I went through hell? Because surviving this kind of attack rewires you. You stop seeking approval from unstable systems. You stop trusting smiles over consistency. You learn to read behavior instead of listening to speeches. Imagine being trained in the dark. Every sense sharpens. Every movement matters. That's what this did to you. They thought they were weakening you. They were teaching you discernment. Here's the final truth they never wanted you to reach. They weren't at peace. They were scared. People who are truly healed don't need to isolate others to feel safe. People who are truly mature don't run quiet smear campaigns. And people who are truly strong don't need an audience to validate their morality. Last quote, let it land hard. If they needed you alone to defeat you, they were never powerful to begin with. Now the fog is lifting. Now the rooms feel different. Now people are rethinking what they accepted without question. Psychological warfare only works until awareness arrives, and awareness just walked in, carrying receipts. Number 3. The one person who refused the script and read between the lines. The lie only survives while everyone agrees to stop thinking. This is where everything breaks. Not with noise, not with confrontation, but with one person tilting their head slightly and thinking, this doesn't make sense. Not someone emotional, not someone dramatic, someone calm, detached, someone who wasn't invested in protecting egos or maintaining fake harmony, someone outside their tight little circle of agreement. They noticed the patterns first, not the story itself, but the way it was told. Everyone said the same thing, but never in the same voice. Same conclusion, different phrasing, like a script that had been rehearsed but not memorized perfectly. That's the first red flag. Truth doesn't need rehearsal. It just exists. Lies, on the other hand, need coordination. They noticed how timelines bent when questioned, how dates shifted slightly depending on who was speaking, how details disappeared when pressed, how screenshots were cropped just enough to remove context. Funny thing about cropped evidence, it always hides more than it shows. Here's a quote that should make the enemy sweat. When stories match too well, they usually weren't discovered, they were distributed. This person didn't rush to defend you, that's important. They didn't jump in emotionally. They didn't announce themselves as your savior. They observed, quietly, patiently. They watched who spoke first and who echoed, who interrupted and who avoided specifics, who got angry at questions that were supposedly harmless. You might be wondering, why didn't anyone else see this? Because most people don't want truth. They want comfort. They want social safety. Questioning a group story risks exile. It risks being next. So people nod along. They repeat. They stay quiet. This person didn't need approval. That's why they were dangerous. Imagine this. You're watching a magic trick. Everyone claps because they're watching the performer's hands. One person watches the assistant step out of place. That's all it takes. The illusion is over. They saw how the loudest accusers were also the most defensive, how the people who claimed peace were obsessed with controlling the narrative, how concern turned into anger the moment clarification was requested. Innocent people don't panic when asked to explain. Liars do. Another quote to let land hard. Truth welcomes questions. Lies demand loyalty. This person started asking questions no one else dared to ask. Not aggressively, casually, the most dangerous kind. Questions that sound harmless but pull threads loose. Can you explain the order of events again? Why does this message start mid-conversation? Who actually witnessed this firsthand? Silence followed, then irritation, then deflection. And that reaction said everything. Imagine pulling on a loose thread in a sweater. At first, nothing happens. Then suddenly, the whole sleeve gives way. That's what happened here. The more they questioned, the more inconsistencies surfaced. Stories contradicted each other. Allies corrected each other in public. Accusations softened into misunderstandings. Language shifted. That's always the sign. When words change, confidence is gone. You might be thinking, why does this person matter so much? Because they weren't emotionally compromised. They had no reason to protect anyone. No need to save face, and that neutrality made them impossible to manipulate. Psychological games fail against observers who aren't desperate to belong. Another metaphor. Imagine a courtroom where everyone agrees to boo the defendant. Then one juror asks to see the evidence. The room goes quiet. That's power. This person didn't just see what was said. They saw who benefited from it. Reputation damage isn't random. It always serves someone. And once you follow the benefit trail, the truth usually waits at the end. Here's another quote, sharp and final. Pay attention to who gains peace from your chaos. They noticed how your silence was used as proof, how your reactions were edited, how your absence from rooms became convenient storytelling space. They noticed something else too. You never changed your story. Your details stayed consistent. Your timeline didn't wobble. Your tone didn't shift depending on the audience. That's not acting, that's memory. Imagine two buildings after an earthquake. One has cracks spreading everywhere. The other sways but stands. Which one was solid to begin with? This person didn't rush to announce their conclusions. They gathered, compared, cross-checked. They treated it like an investigation, not gossip. That's why the proof they uncovered couldn't be brushed away. It wasn't emotional, it was structural. And now we reach the part that changes everything. Once one person sees through it, the illusion weakens for everyone else. People start rethinking what they accepted blindly. Doubt spreads quietly, not loudly, not dramatically, just enough to make the story unstable. And instability terrifies liars more than exposure, because instability can't be controlled. You didn't need to convince this person. You didn't need to chase them. Truth met them halfway. Final quote. Let it echo. The most dangerous witness is the one who was never supposed to be paying attention. They saw through it, and once they did, the lie stopped being safe. It became fragile, brittle, one more question away from collapse. This is the moment the enemy realizes the game has shifted, not because you fought back, but because someone finally looked closely. And now the proof exists. And now justice has a direction. Number 4. They went silent and turned invisible on purpose. When the noise stops, that's when the real listening begins. This is the phase nobody sees coming, the moment when everything goes quiet and people assume the danger has passed, when they think the heat died down, when they mistake silence for surrender. That's when the smartest moves are made. They disappeared on purpose. No announcements, no dramatic exits, no social posts about taking space or protecting energy. They simply went dark, cut ties cleanly, stopped reacting, stopped commenting, stopped being visible in places where visibility could be tracked. To the enemy, it looked like exhaustion, like defeat, like someone who couldn't handle the pressure anymore. That assumption cost them everything. Because going dark isn't running. Going dark is positioning. They didn't vanish out of fear. They vanished to remove noise, to stop influencing outcomes, to stop tipping hands. When you want truth, you don't storm the room. You let people relax enough to expose themselves. Here's the first gut punch for the enemy. People only reveal who they are when they think the audience is gone. While you were being watched, they spoke carefully, polished words, moral speeches, fake concern. But once they believed the threat was neutralized, the masks loosened. Conversations got sloppy, jokes got darker, confessions slipped out sideways. That's human nature. Arrogance always follows perceived victory. This person didn't rush in like a spy movie. No fake identities, no forced infiltration. They simply listened, earned trust the slow way, showed consistency, became familiar. People opened up because they thought it was safe. They thought no one was keeping score anymore. Imagine this, a room full of people whispering behind locked doors. The door opens quietly, and instead of shutting them up, it makes them more comfortable. That's when the truth spills. Not under pressure, under comfort. They infiltrated inner circles, not by manipulation, but by patience. They stayed neutral, didn't react emotionally, didn't pick sides, and that neutrality made people speak freely. Everyone wants to feel understood, even liars, especially liars. Another quote the enemy never wants repeated: silence doesn't mean ignorance, it means evidence is being collected. Piece by piece, real evidence started stacking, not screenshots taken out of context, not edited clips, not hearsay, actual communications, uncut messages, full timelines, admissions spoken casually, like they'd never be repeated. Statements people only make when they believe the past is buried. You might be thinking, why didn't this come out sooner? Because truth gathered in chaos gets dismissed as noise. Truth gathered in silence becomes undeniable. This wasn't about exposing fragments. It was about understanding the system. Here's a metaphor. Imagine trying to understand a machine while it's running loud. Impossible. So you shut it down. Then you see the gears, the wiring, the points of failure. That's what going dark did. It slowed everything down enough for the blueprint to appear. Another metaphor. Imagine a house with hidden rooms. You don't find them by smashing walls. You find them by studying the floor plan, by noticing where space exists that shouldn't. That's how this unfolded. What they uncovered wasn't scraps. It wasn't maybe this or possibly that. It was structure. Who started what? Who benefited? Who escalated? Who stayed silent when silence served them? Who pretended ignorance while guiding outcomes? Patterns emerged so clearly they couldn't be unseen. Here's another quote. Let it sting. Random chaos doesn't repeat itself this cleanly. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't misunderstanding stacked on misunderstanding. It was design, a full narrative strategy with roles assigned. Leaders, echoes, enforcers, bystanders. Everyone played a part, even if they told themselves they were innocent. And here's the moment the enemy truly lost. The evidence didn't rely on your emotions. It didn't depend on how hurt you looked. It didn't need sympathy. It stood on its own, calm, cold, organized. The kind of proof that doesn't argue. It simply exists and forces everyone else to explain themselves. You might be asking, why didn't they confront them immediately? Because confrontation triggers defense. Defense triggers destruction of evidence. Silence lets people keep talking. Silence lets people keep documenting themselves without realizing it. Another metaphor. Imagine fishing with dynamite versus a net. One scares everything away. The other catches everything quietly. They used the net. The enemy thought they had time, thought they were safe, thought the story had settled. They relaxed, and relaxed people make mistakes. They contradict themselves. They joke about things they shouldn't. They admit motives when they think they're among friends. Final quote before this lands fully. Arrogance always signs its own confession. What was uncovered wasn't just proof that you were right. It was proof of intent, proof of coordination, proof that the damage wasn't accidental. And that's the difference between a messy situation and a case for justice. Now the silence makes sense, doesn't it? It wasn't absence, it was preparation. While you were healing, someone else was collecting truth. While the enemy was celebrating, someone else was documenting their downfall. While they thought the storm had passed, the pressure was building quietly underneath. And now the blueprint is complete. No edits, no guesswork, no spin. Just the truth, laid out clean enough that even the people who wanted to deny it have to lower their eyes. Going dark didn't end the story. It finished writing it. Number 5, the receipts they prayed would never see daylight. Lies are loud, evidence is silent until it clears its throat. This is the moment everything snaps into focus, not emotionally, logically, clinically, irreversibly, because once evidence enters the room, opinions stop mattering, stories stop working, performance ends, and what they were so confident would stay buried starts reading like a confession written in their own hands. What surfaced wasn't vague, it wasn't circumstantial, it wasn't open to interpretation, it was deleted messages recovered, not imagined, altered screenshots exposed, not assumed, forged timestamps traced, not guessed, patterns so consistent they could only come from coordination, attacks so synchronized they couldn't be accidental. This wasn't chaos, this was orchestration, and the enemy knows it. Private conversations surfaced where they said your name without fear, where they admitted what they were doing to you step by step, like a game plan. They joked about how easy it was, laughed about how people believed them without question, reassured each other that you wouldn't be believed anyway. That's the part that hits hardest, not the cruelty, the confidence in getting away with it. Here's the first gut punch they can't dodge. No one jokes about lies unless they think the truth is powerless. You might be asking yourself right now, how could they be so sure? Because they thought the system was on their side. They thought social proof mattered more than actual proof. They believed popularity could replace integrity. And for a while, they were right, until evidence showed up and stripped the mask clean off. Imagine this. A magician performing the same trick for years because no one ever checks behind the curtain. Then one day, someone does. Suddenly, the trick isn't impressive, it's embarrassing. That's what this evidence did. It didn't just expose wrongdoing, it exposed how sloppy and arrogant it all was. Another metaphor. Imagine a house built on sand, beautifully painted, admired from the outside. The moment rain comes, the foundation gives out. That rain was documentation, logs, metadata, full conversation threads, the stuff you can't talk your way out of. Here's another quote to let sink in. People don't delete messages unless they know exactly what those messages prove. They altered screenshots to control context, cropped just enough to hide intent, changed dates to fit a story. That alone tells you everything. Innocent people don't need to edit reality. Truth doesn't need makeup. Only lies need lighting. And then there's the coordination, the part they can't explain away as coincidence. Attacks launched within minutes of each other, identical language used by different people who claimed they never spoke. The same accusations popping up in different places like clockwork. That's not organic outrage, that's a rollout. You might wonder, why didn't anyone question it sooner? Because most people don't expect malice dressed as concern. They don't expect planning wrapped in smiles. They don't expect people to weaponize empathy language. But expectation isn't a defense. Evidence doesn't care what people expected. Another metaphor: imagine watching security footage from multiple cameras and realizing the same person appears in every frame at the exact same time. Something goes wrong. That's what this looked like, a pattern too clean to deny. Here's another quote that cuts deep. Coincidences don't schedule meetings. The files read like a crime novel because they followed the same structure: planning, execution, celebration, damage control, reassurance. They checked in with each other after every move, confirmed reactions, adjusted strategy. That's not a misunderstanding, that's a campaign. And the most damning part? They believed you were powerless. They said it openly. They relied on your isolation, your silence, your reputation already being damaged. They counted on fatigue, on you giving up, on you doubting yourself long enough for the truth to die quietly. That's where they miscalculated. Because evidence doesn't need you to fight for it emotionally. It fights on its own. It doesn't get tired. It doesn't forget. It doesn't flinch when challenged. It just sits there, forcing everyone else to explain why it exists. Here's another metaphor. Imagine standing in a courtroom where someone swears they were never there. And then the door opens and footage plays of them walking in, sitting down, and laughing. That's the level of certainty we're talking about. Another quote, sharp and final for them. Denial is loud when proof is quiet and complete. This evidence doesn't suggest innocence, it proves it, not through sympathy, not through emotional appeal, through structure, through consistency, through documentation that aligns across sources, independent verification, the kind of proof that doesn't crumble under pressure. And now, watch the shift. Watch how language changes. Watch how accusations soften. Watch how "they did this" becomes "it was complicated." Watch how confidence evaporates. Watch how people stop repeating the story with the same certainty. That's not growth. That's fear. Fear of being associated with something that can now be proven false. You might be thinking, why does this feel so validating and so painful at the same time? Because being right doesn't erase what it cost you. Justice doesn't rewind time. It acknowledges reality, and acknowledgement hits deep when you've been gaslit for so long. Here's the truth they can't outrun. This evidence didn't just clear your name, it exposed their intent, and intent changes everything. It turns accidents into actions, mistakes into choices, stories into strategies. Once intent is proven, the moral high ground collapses instantly. Final quote. Let it land like a verdict. Truth doesn't argue, it submits exhibits. They laughed when they thought no one was listening. They celebrated when they thought the damage was permanent. They reassured each other that you'd never be believed. Now they're quiet. Now they're careful. Now they're realizing that the same universe they thought they outsmarted has a long memory and perfect timing. The evidence is complete. The blueprint is exposed, and the story they wrote for you just became the case that undoes them. This isn't speculation anymore. This is documentation, and documentation doesn't forgive. Number 6. The moment the floor drops and everyone pretends they were never there. Panic doesn't scream, it erases. When the truth drops, it doesn't arrive like thunder, it arrives like a system failure. First comes the quiet panic. Accounts disappear without explanation. Posts vanish like they never existed. Stories get deleted in the middle of the night. People don't announce exits. They retreat fast. Because nothing terrifies a liar more than timestamps they can't outrun. Overnight, the narrative mutates. What was once said with confidence suddenly needs context. What was once repeated loudly now becomes misunderstood. That's not growth. That's fear adapting. They aren't reflecting. They're calculating. Then comes the silence. The same people who were loudest about your guilt stop speaking entirely. No more commentary, no more moral grandstanding, just quiet unfollows, quiet distance, quiet hope that if they shrink small enough, the truth won't notice them. Imagine a room full of people who just realized the cameras were on the whole time. That's this phase. Here's the line they hate. Silence after exposure is an admission without words. After that, the private messages arrive. Not accountability, not ownership. Carefully worded half-apologies, excuses disguised as explanations. I didn't know everything. I was just trying to stay neutral. Forgiveness requested without responsibility offered. They want relief, not repair. And suddenly, people who said nothing during your destruction want to stand beside your vindication. They claim they always sensed something was off. They want proximity to the truth, now that it's safe. But survival teaches you something brutal and permanent. You don't forget who vanished when it mattered. Imagine drowning while people argue whether the water is real. When you finally reach shore alone, their applause means nothing. You're already breathing. This moment isn't about revenge. Revenge keeps you attached. This isn't about validation either. Validation comes too late to heal what isolation already taught you. Somewhere in the silence, you changed. You stopped needing their approval to stand upright. You stopped waiting for permission to be right. You stopped explaining yourself to people who never listened. Final truth, calm and lethal. By the time they believe you, you no longer need them to. The truth dropped. They scattered, and you stayed standing. Number 7, you didn't wait to be saved. You walked out of the fire yourself. Rescue fantasies die when real strength shows up. Here's the truth that changes everything and terrifies the enemy at the same time. You already saved yourself, quietly, without witnesses, without applause. While they were busy rewriting stories, you were rebuilding your spine. While they thought isolation would break you, it stripped you down to something unmovable. You learned how to stand without backup, how to wake up without reassurance, how to keep going without anyone clapping. That kind of growth doesn't look dramatic. It looks boring from the outside, and that's why it's deadly. Because once someone learns how to survive alone, opinions lose their grip. Manipulation loses leverage. Fear loses its favorite weapon. Here's the line that hits them hardest. You didn't survive by being believed. You survived by becoming untouchable. The truth isn't coming to rescue you. You're not waiting for justice to give you permission to breathe. The truth is coming to do something else entirely. It's coming to expose them, to reflect their choices back at them without commentary. Evidence isn't a hero. It's a mirror. And mirrors don't lie to protect anyone's image. Imagine spending years pointing fingers, confident no one would ever check behind the curtain. Then one day, the lights come on, not to shame you, just to show you. That's what's about to happen to them. And here's the part that matters more than the exposure. The person who went dark knew the cost. They knew they might never get credit. They knew they might become a target. They knew comfort would disappear the moment they chose truth. And they chose it anyway, not with speeches, with action, with patience, with risk. That's real loyalty, not posts, not promises, not "I'm here for you" texts that vanish under pressure. Real loyalty is costly. It shows up when silence is safer. It acts when no one is watching. It chooses justice over belonging. Final truth, sharp and final. You don't owe your future to people who only cared once it was safe. You already saved yourself. Now the universe is just making sure the truth finishes the job. Number 8. When the truth gets locked in and there's no way to undo it. Exposure isn't loud, it's permanent. This is the reckoning they never planned for. Not confrontation, not drama, record. When the evidence becomes public, archived, and impossible to erase, the entire game ends at once. No edits, no spin, no rewrites. The narrative doesn't just weaken, it collapses completely. Because lies can survive arguments, but they can't survive documentation. They're left standing in the ruins of something they thought was clever, screenshots they assumed were gone, messages they believed were buried, timelines that now exist outside their control. The same confidence they once used to destroy you becomes the thing that exposes them. There's no crowd to hide in when the truth is indexed and permanent. Here's the line that should freeze them in place. Time doesn't erase truth, it hands it a microphone. Notice what happens next. The lie doesn't defend itself, it explodes. People scramble to explain actions that suddenly look intentional instead of accidental. Words like miscommunication and complex situation start doing overtime. But complexity doesn't survive clean records. Intent doesn't survive timestamps. You might wonder, should I forgive them now? Should I show grace? Understand this clearly. You don't owe anyone forgiveness to prove growth. You don't owe patience to people who engineered your isolation. You don't owe peace to people who destroyed yours. Compassion isn't mandatory. Silence isn't cruelty. Distance isn't bitterness. It's clarity. Imagine surviving a collapse and then being asked to comfort the people who caused it because they're embarrassed. That's not maturity. That's self-betrayal. Here's another truth that lands hard. Accountability feels like punishment only to those who avoided it. You already paid the price, in isolation, in doubt, in nights where you questioned your own memory. You don't pay twice to make them feel better. This isn't revenge. Revenge keeps you tied to the wreckage. This is the truth finally catching up, walking calmly, carrying proof. And this time, it doesn't fade. It doesn't rely on belief. It's documented. Final line. Let it seal the moment. They don't get to rewrite history when history is archived. The reckoning isn't coming. It's already here. And now we close this chapter the only way it can be closed. Calm, clean, unarguable. You've seen how the truth moves. Slowly at first, then all at once. You survived the silence, the doubt, the isolation, and you didn't need permission to stand back up. The universe didn't rush this. It made it permanent. If this hit something real inside you, like the video, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop 777 in the comments as a quiet signal that you know what it costs to be right before proof arrives. Stay sharp, stay grounded. The truth always finishes the job.